St. Petersburg, December 29th, 1916. A man is sitting in a basement, eating cake and drinking wine. He was invited here by a prince, a man he trusted. What he doesn't know is that the cake is poisoned, the wine is poisoned. Everything on that table has been laced with enough cyanide to kill 5 men. He eats, he drinks, he keeps talking. Nothing happens. The prince panics. He leaves the room, comes back with a pistol, and shoots the man in the back. The man falls. The prince leaves again. When he returns minutes later, the man opens his eyes, grabs him by the throat, and starts to crawl up the stairs toward the street. He is shot again, and again, beaten with an iron bar, tied up, thrown through a hole in the ice of a frozen river. When they pulled the body out 3 days later, the official cause of death was not poison, not gunshot wounds, not the beating. It was drowning. His name was Grigori Rasputin. And before we talk about how he died, we need to understand how he lived, because nothing about this man makes sense unless you know where he came from. Rasputin was born around 1869 in a tiny village called Pokrovskoye, a place so remote, so cold, so far from the center of the world that most people living there would never leave it. His father was a peasant farmer. His family was poor, like almost everyone around them. Rasputin received no formal education. He could barely read. As a young man, he had a reputation for being wild, drinking too much, stealing horses, getting into fights. He was not a holy man. He was not a healer. He was nobody. But something happened when he was around 18 years old. Something that nobody, including Rasputin himself, could fully explain. He visited a monastery, and when he left, he was different. He began walking. Pilgrimage, that's the word for a long religious journey on foot. He walked hundreds of kilometers across Russia, sleeping in fields, begging for food, visiting churches and monasteries along the way. He did this for years. When he returned to his village, people noticed something had changed in him. His eyes, everyone who met him later in life described his eyes. Dark, intense, impossible to look away from. He had a presence, a kind of force that made people feel he could see straight through them. He began to pray with people, to counsel them, to give advice and guidance. A small group of followers formed around him. Word began to spread. Here's the thing about Russia in 1900, though. The country was deeply religious. The Orthodox Church was powerful. And ordinary people, especially those suffering from illness, poverty, or grief, were desperately searching for something beyond what the official church was offering. A holy man who came from nothing, who walked barefoot in the snow, who spoke simply and directly. That was enormously appealing. Rasputin was not a priest. He had no official religious title. What he had was something harder to define, an extraordinary ability to make people believe in him. And that ability was about to take him somewhere extraordinary. By 1903, Rasputin had arrived in St. Petersburg, the capital of the Russian Empire, one of the most beautiful and most unequal cities in the world, a city of golden palaces and starving workers, of extravagant aristocrats and invisible poor. He arrived as a peasant. He had no money, no connections, no name anyone recognized. Within 2 years, he was being introduced to the Tsar. How did that happen? Through the one thing no amount of wealth or power could solve. Tsar Nicholas II had a son, Alexei, a boy who was born with hemophilia, a condition where the blood cannot clot properly. In plain language, even a small cut, a bump, a bruise could cause internal bleeding that went on for days. The boy suffered terribly. There was no treatment at the time. The doctors were powerless. The Tsarina Alexandra, Alexei's mother, was in permanent anguish. She prayed constantly, She tried every doctor, every medicine, every suggestion. Nothing helped. Then someone told her about Rasputin. In October 1906, Rasputin was brought to the palace to see Alexei during a severe episode, a crisis where the boy was in enormous pain and getting worse. After Rasputin spent time with him, praying, speaking quietly, reportedly simply sitting with the boy, Alexei began to recover. This happened again and again. Every time Alexei had a serious episode and Rasputin was summoned, the boy improved. There is a famous incident in 1912. The family was traveling, and Alexei suffered the worst episode of his life. He was so ill that official death bulletins were prepared. The Tsarina sent a desperate telegram to Rasputin, who was far away. He telegraphed back, a simple message telling her not to worry, that God had heard her prayers, and the boy would not die. The bleeding stopped that night. How do we explain this? Modern historians and doctors have offered several theories. Rasputin may have been a skilled hypnotist. Hypnosis can reduce anxiety, and reduced anxiety in a hemophiliac reduces the physical stress that worsens bleeding. Some researchers point out that doctors at the time were giving Alexei aspirin, a medicine we now know makes hemophilia dramatically worse. Rasputin, who distrusted doctors, may have simply stopped them giving the medication. But here is what we cannot fully explain: why it worked so consistently. Why, every time the boy got better? The Tsarina had no doubt. To her, it was simple. God was working through this man. Rasputin had been sent to save her son, and because she believed that completely, absolutely, without question, everything that came next became possible. Let's pause for a moment and appreciate how impossible this is. Russia in 1910 was one of the most rigidly structured societies in the world. The aristocracy, the noble families, had maintained their power for centuries. The distance between a Siberian peasant and the inner circle of the Tsar was not just social, it was considered almost cosmic. It simply did not happen. And yet, Rasputin was there. He dined at the palace. He played with the royal children. He sat alone with the Tsarina for hours, talking and praying. The Tsar himself wrote about him with warmth and respect in his personal diary. The aristocracy was horrified. Who was this man? What did he want? What was he doing to the Tsarina? The rumors were extraordinary. They said he was a member of a dangerous religious sect called the Callisti, a group accused of mixing religious ecstasy with sexual ritual. They said his relationship with the Tsarina was improper. They said he was a spy for Germany. They said he was the devil himself. Most of these rumors were invented or wildly exaggerated, but they spread and they stuck. Here's the thing about Rasputin, though. He did not behave like someone trying to stay invisible. He drank heavily and publicly. He visited expensive restaurants and behaved outrageously. He spoke to powerful men with the casual rudeness of someone who knows they cannot be touched, because he knew he couldn't be touched. Whenever his enemies moved against him, whenever the police investigated, whenever a politician tried to have him removed from St. Petersburg, the Tsarina intervened. She protected him personally. She told the Tsar that removing Rasputin would mean losing God's protection over Alexei. Several prime ministers tried to warn the Tsar about the damage Rasputin was doing to the reputation of the royal family. One minister wrote a personal letter detailing the problem directly. He was fired shortly after. By 1914, Rasputin had survived multiple assassination attempts. A woman stabbed him in the stomach in his home village. He nearly died. He recovered. His enemies were running out of options. And then the war came, and everything got worse. World War I began in 1914. For Russia, it was a catastrophe. The army was under-equipped and badly led. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died in the first months. The Russian people were suffering. Food shortages, poverty, grief. In 1915, Tsar Nicholas made a decision that many historians considered the beginning of the end. He left St. Petersburg to personally command the military at the front. This meant leaving the Tsarina in charge at home, and the Tsarina trusted one advisor above all others. Between 1915 and 1916, under Rasputin's influence, the Tsarina wrote to the Tsar almost daily, letters full of political advice, much of it directly from Rasputin. She urged him to appoint certain ministers, to dismiss others. She passed along Rasputin's suggestions as though they were divine guidance. In 2 years, Russia went through 4 prime ministers, 5 ministers of the interior, and 3 foreign ministers. Competent administrators were dismissed because Rasputin disliked them. Incompetent or corrupt men were appointed because he approved of them. The Russian government was being steered, in part, by a Siberian peasant with no political training and no accountability to anyone. The aristocracy was no longer merely disgusted. They were panicking. In the wider population, Rasputin had become a symbol of everything wrong with the Romanov regimes: corruption, secrecy, foreign influence. Some people believed that Tsarina, who was German by birth, and Rasputin were working together to deliberately weaken Russia. This was not true, but in a country at war, with people dying and starving, truth mattered less than the story people told themselves. By December 1916, a group of nobles had decided there was only one solution. Prince Felix Yusupov was one of the richest men in Russia. Young, elegant, and deeply convinced that Rasputin was destroying the country he loved. He spent months planning the murder. He recruited a small group of conspirators, including a member of the royal family, Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, and a right-wing politician named Vladimir Purishkevich. The plan was simple: invite Rasputin to the Yusupov palace, poison him, dispose of the body, tell no one. On the night of December 29th, Rasputin was brought to the palace basement under the pretense of meeting Yusupov's wife. He was told she would be down shortly. He waited, he ate the cakes, he drank the wine. According to Yusupov's account, the account he gave publicly, the one that became famous, Rasputin sat there for 2 hours eating poisoned food with no effect whatsoever. Yusupov, increasingly desperate, went upstairs to get a gun. He came back down and shot Rasputin in the chest. Rasputin fell. Yusupov checked the body. He went upstairs to tell the others it was done. A few minutes later, there was a sound from below. Yusupov went back to the basement. Rasputin's eyes were open. He grabbed Yusupov by the shoulders and spoke to him. Some accounts say he called him by name. Then he stood up, staggered through a locked door into the courtyard, and began crawling through the snow toward the gate. Purishkevich ran after him and shot him twice more. The men beat him. They tied him with rope and dropped him through a hole cut in the ice of the Moika River. 3 days later, the body was recovered. His hands, the autopsy noted, were raised, as though he had tried to free himself underwater. The cause of death? Drowning. Here is where the story should end. But it doesn't. Quite. Because historians have been looking at that night for over 100 years, and several things don't add up. The first problem is Yusupov himself. He told the story of that night. The unbelievable poison resistance. The impossible survival. Multiple times in his life. And each time he told it, the details changed. Some researchers believe Yusupov invented or exaggerated the more dramatic elements to make himself sound important, and to make the killing seem more like a heroic act and less like a simple murder. The autopsy results were ambiguous. Modern forensic analysts who have reviewed the evidence say the cyanide levels in the food, if they existed at all, may not have been fatal. Rasputin may not have been as impossible to kill as the legend suggests. The legend may have been partly built by the man who killed him. The second question, the healing of Alexei, remains open. We have documented evidence that the boy improved when Rasputin was present. We have several plausible scientific explanations, but we do not have certainty. We probably never will. The third question is the most unsettling. In 2004, British intelligence files were partially declassified. Among them was evidence suggesting that a British secret intelligence agent named Oswald Rayner, who was stationed in St. Petersburg and who had been at Oxford University with Prince Yusupov, was present at the Yusupov Palace on the night of the murder. Some researchers believe Rayner may have fired the final fatal shot, that Britain, afraid Rasputin was pushing Russia toward a separate peace with Germany, which would have freed German troops to fight on the Western Front, had its own reasons to want him dead. The Russian nobles may not have acted alone. No one has proven this. The British government has never confirmed it. But the files exist. The connection between Rayner and Yusupov exists. And the timing, a murder that kept Russia in a war it was losing, served British interests perfectly. Before his death, Rasputin wrote a letter. In it, he predicted that if he was killed by peasants, the Tsar would survive. But if he was killed by nobles, by members of the aristocracy, the Tsar and his entire family would be destroyed within 2 years. He was killed by nobles. The Romanov family was executed in July 1918. 20 months later, Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg with nothing. No name, no education, no title. He died as the most feared and hated man in Russia. In between, he healed a dying boy in ways medicine couldn't explain. He walked through golden palace halls that no peasant was ever supposed to enter. He made enemies of the most powerful people in the country and survived until he didn't. Was he a holy man, a fraud, a healer, a manipulator? The answer is probably that he was all of those things at once. The most interesting people usually are. The empire he helped, without meaning to, bring down fell less than 3 months after his death. The revolution came. The Tsar and his family were executed. 300 years of Romanov rule ended. One man from a village no one had ever heard of had stood at the center of all of it. If this story gave you something to think about, or some new English to work with, subscribe to Storied English. Every video is a new story in clear English, designed to make you a better speaker without ever feeling like a lesson. The story companion for this video is in the description. Vocabulary, a sentence pattern you can steal, and the question I want you to answer in the comments. I'll see you in the next story.